The entire community was shrouded in profound sadness on that somber day, which would later resonate deeply within them. Grief weighed heavily upon the townsfolk after the horrific loss of Eric, a central figure celebrated for his tireless dedication. His death in unimaginable circumstances proved difficult to accept. Many struggled to reconcile the image of the smiling, vital man they knew with the finality of his burial, leaving a void impossible to fill. Even those who hadn't known Eric personally felt intense sympathy for a village enduring such a devastating blow. A lingering disbelief tempted some to hope it was merely a cruel hoax, that Eric's familiar laughter might still sound and the coffin lids suddenly swing open. Yet individuals present who knew Eric intimately understood he would never participate in such macabre theatrics. The pastor's comforting words served only to deepen the painful acceptance settling over the mourners. This tragedy had unfolded simply during a hike with his wife Becca. Eric lost his footing on treacherous rocky terrain. Before she could even cry out, he plunged over a cliff to his death. Now sorrowful gazes followed his casket's descent into the freshly dug earth. Beside Eric's closest friend, Nate, Becca wept uncontrollably. Nate held her securely as her anguished sobs cut through the quiet, audible even from a distance. Hearts ached for the grieving widow, silently questioning how she would navigate the future alone. Nate's hands firm on her shoulders pulled her closer, promising vigilant support through her pain. From the moment the shocking accident occurred, Nate had remained a constant source of stability for Becca, seemingly taking on the role of safeguarding his late friend's wife. He provided her primary comfort, guiding her through the bewildering aftermath, night after night. Haunted by dreams of Eric falling, Becca would phone him. He endured these long calls without complaint, until her distress eased enough for sleep. Standing together now, they watched as workers filled the grave soil meticulously smoothed over. Becca remained fixed in place, unable to tear her eyes away, while the ground slowly regained its level appearance. Finally, Eric rested within the earth, and perhaps Becca might have begun contemplating the difficult path forward. However, her tears ceased abruptly, shocked into silence by a pack of wolves charging into the burial site, instantly igniting pandemonium. Despite the chaos erupting around them, the wolves surged toward the new grave. Ignoring the horrified crowd, they fell upon the fresh earth and began digging frantically with wild urgency. A wave of collective terror washed over the stunned mourners. People reacted instantly. Some called emergency services. Others shouted for cemetery security. A few tried to yell the creatures away from the desecrated resting place. Amidst the frenzy, Becca sat frozen in shock, unable to comprehend the sight of wild beasts tearing open her husband's grave, staring in utter disbelief at the wolves savagely churning the disturbed soil where Eric lay. A chilling realization pierced Becca's grief. She recognized each animal. These were Eric's wolves. The memory broke through her numbness, recalling the story woven into the fabric of their lives together, the tale of how he'd met them. Eric's love for nature far exceeded ordinary enjoyment. He needed the wilderness. Camping and hiking nourished his very soul, restoring him in ways few understood. It was a source of profound renewal. He passionately shared with Becca, believing the wild imparted something vital and uniquely positive. It was on such adventures that his most important connections had formed. He'd met Nate during a college camping trip, forging a deep friendship. Years later, it was during another hike that Becca herself entered his world, an encounter destined to change everything. Nate had actually approached her first, expressing romantic interest, yet Becca's heart responded instantly to Eric's quiet presence. She declined Nate's overtures with kindness and respect, hoping instead that Eric might come to feel the same way about her. He did. Once their mutual affection was confessed, a profound partnership began, blossoming into deep shared happiness. Eric truly considered himself the most fortunate man, cherished completely by the woman he loved. Life unfolded harmoniously for PF. The couple. Eric enjoyed considerable wealth, his diverse investments generating steady income, which freed Becca from any need to work. He cherished this arrangement, encouraging her to embrace leisure and time with friends, taking genuine delight in fulfilling her every wish. Remarkably, Eric and Nate's deep friendship endured and even flourished after Eric and Becca became a couple. Her inclusion seemed to strengthen their bond instead of straining it. They often continued their cherished hiking and camping excursions together, though sometimes Becca and Eric ventured alone, if Nate had other commitments. It was during one such private trip early in their marriage that they discovered the wolf cubs. While camping in the familiar woods near their town, Eric suddenly encountered a heart-stopping sight. A pitiful litter of helpless cubs, cornered by a menacing pack of hyenas readying to attack. Unseen by the animals, Nate happened to be perched high above in a sturdy tree. He reacted instantly, bombarding the confused hyenas with hurled branches and stones. Fearing a larger unseen adversary, the hyenas frantically scanned their surroundings, but found nothing tangible. Aware that revealing his solitary position could trigger a united assault, Nate remained hidden among the leaves, relentlessly pelting the confused predators until they finally retreated in panic defeat. After a cautious wait, Eric cautiously approached the traumatized cubs huddled together. Their condition was devastatingly frail, starved, frightfully thin, clearly orphaned. Eric surmised their mother must have fallen to the hyenas some time before. Knowing the predators would inevitably return, and these vulnerable pups couldn't survive on their own, he carefully gathered the tiny, fragile forms into his strong arms. He carried them back to Becca, waiting anxiously at their campsite. There he improvised warm milk for the desperate creatures, well aware it was a poor substitute for their mother's vital nourishment, but absolutely necessary for their immediate survival. The exhausted cubs fed ravenously until finally content, collapsing into a deep, exhausted sleep. After the rescued cubs awoke, Eric fully anticipated they would vanish into the surrounding trees. To his astonishment and delight, however, they chose to remain close, faithfully accompanying him and Becca for the rest of their camping trip. They even returned home with the couple, living inside the house for several months. Yet their rapid growth soon made it impossible to disguise them as mere domestic dogs. Respecting their inherent wild spirit and resisting the urge to domesticate them further, Eric reluctantly returned the maturing wolves to the nearby forest. The parting carried deep sorrow, and he assumed this marked their final goodbye. Yet remarkably, during every subsequent hike or camping trip he took in those woods, the wolves found him. Each reunion infused Eric's outdoor adventures with profound joy, enriching his wilderness connection right up to the hike that ended his life. That particular trip had been suggested by Nate, who told Eric about a rugged, rarely explored trail featuring hazardous footing and a sheer precipice. Eager for the challenge of new territory, Eric embraced the plan, though Becca strongly opposed, leaving their familiar, safer paths. Unable to change his mind, she accompanied him reluctantly. It was during the ascent that catastrophe struck. A stone shifted under Eric's weight as his foot slipped. He tumbled briefly on the loose rocks before pitching backwards over the precipice with a strangled cry. This horrific instant became Becca's recurring torment, the stuff of ceaseless nightmares. The fall proved catastrophic, not just because it was fatal, but due to the extreme height. The impact deformed Eric's body beyond any recognition, utterly destroying the vibrant man he'd been. Deeply aware of her husband's respected standing in the community, Becca was fiercely determined to shield his memory. She insisted on an immediate burial with a firmly sealed coffin, ensuring no accidental glimpse of the disfigured remains could tarnish how he was remembered. Her every action following his death was an act of devotion. Now witnessing these wolves tearing Open that sacred site. The grave she'd shielded with such resolve, overpowering dread froze her in place. She tried to rise, but her legs gave way. Collapsing onto her knees, she slipped into unconsciousness. Nate reacted immediately, lifting her limp form carefully back into her chair before swiftly turning his attention to the frenzied wolves. He began by shouting and waving his arms wildly, trying to startle the animals away. They ignored his threats completely, their focus unbroken, as claws tore into the soft earth with feverish intensity. The fresh soil flew until their frantic digging hit something solid. They redoubled their efforts, clawing deeper, faster, until paws scraped directly against the coffin's unyielding surface, a terrible scraping sound cutting through the pandemonium and chilling onlookers to the bone. Nate lunged forward, grabbing the first rock he could find to throw harder, his shouts now raw with desperate rage. The unnerving scrape of claws on coffin wood galvanized the fragmented crowd into collective action. Fear and determination merged as people rallied, converging towards the violated grave to form a unified front against the desecration. Nate snatched up a thick fallen branch, wielding it like a spear, and thrusting its blunt end towards the animals. His focused aggression drew two wolves away from their task. They spun to face him, lips curled back in savage warning, exposing gleaming teeth in low, vibrating snarls. Yet, the third wolf remained utterly fixated on its purpose, paws a blur as it feverishly excavated soil from around the coffin's edge. Despite the distraction, their combined effort cleared earth away, straining with deep, resonant growls that cut through the panicked murmurs. The powerful creatures wedged their heads beneath the heavy lid. Muscles bunched as they pushed upward, forcing the wooden cover to groan and shift sideways with terrible, grudging reluctance. Becca's terrified scream tore through the chaos, a raw plea for Nate to stop them. He clenched the makeshift spear tighter, muscles coiled to strike, yet a paralyzing fear held him frozen. Provoking the focused predators could unleash unpredictable savagery. Others around him mirrored this stunned hesitation, caught between horror and helplessness. With a final grating screech of protesting wood, the stubborn lid yielded, shoved open wide enough for the wolves to thrust their muzzles into the shadowed interior. The frantic activity paused abruptly. The animals sniffed. With urgent concentration, heads deep inside the coffin, seemingly searching for something rather than attacking the remains. Then, as suddenly as they'd arrived, the wolves withdrew. Instead of tearing at Eric's shrouded form, they backed away from the gaping casket, retreating towards the woods. As they moved, the unnerving sight they left behind shocked the onlookers into stunned silence. Eric's limp, pale hand had slipped from the darkness of the coffin's interior, dangling lifelessly over the edge, towards the newly displaced earth below. Nate's eyes locked onto that hand. Widening in horrified recognition, the branch tumbled from his suddenly nerveless grip, landing with a soft thud. Moving as if entranced, he stepped forward, oblivious to the crowd. Remarkably, the wolves parted before him, without aggression, creating a clear path to the grave. They watched in silence as Nate descended into the pit. Reaching the coffin, he pushed the heavy lid wider, exposing more of the shrouded figure beneath. His gaze swept over the burial suit, lingering on exposed skin where fabric gaped open. Then the breath rushed from his lungs in a strangled gasp. He staggered backwards as if struck, collapsing hard against the raw dirt wall of the pit. Parts of Eric's body not completely covered by the shroud or suit revealed wounds beneath. Angry, deep lacerations marred his flesh, injuries utterly inconsistent with the expected trauma of a brutal fall onto rocks. The undeniable evidence began to shatter the carefully constructed narrative of a tragic hiking accident. Following the disturbing revelation at the gravesite, Eric's body was transported to the morgue for a thorough autopsy to establish the definitive cause of death. Becca, escorted to the police station as the primary witness, sat before investigators. Her voice trembled as she recounted the story, hardened by trauma and desperation, clinging to the narrative of a tragic accident since the moment he vanished over the cliff's edge. "There was nothing I could do," she insisted, Knuckles' white eyes pleading for belief. "He slipped. It happened so fast. Those cuts, it was the rocks tearing him apart. They must just look like knife wounds." She desperately maintained this version, even as the wounds exposed in the violated grave screamed, a horrifying contradiction. The autopsy report delivered its brutal verdict hours later. Eric died before his body plummeted down the precipice. Multiple deep stab wounds penetrating vital areas were the true cause. The fall served merely as a gruesome attempt to conceal murder. Subjected to relentless interrogation, Becca eventually shattered. The carefully constructed facade collapsed entirely as she broke down, sobbing uncontrollably, and confessed. She acknowledged attacking Eric with a concealed penknife, unleashing a frenzied series of stabs before heaving his bleeding body over the cliff to stage a fatal hiking accident. The initial violence and the subsequent impact of the fall were intended to mask the knife wounds beneath layers of trauma, to solidify the lie she confessed to bribing a doctor to falsify the death certificate, attributing Eric's demise solely to the fall. Her insistence on a closed casket stemmed entirely from this calculated deception. An open viewing risked exposing the hidden stab injuries and unraveling her fabricated narrative. Pressed for motive, Becca revealed she had lost all affection for Eric. Resenting his frequent absences on camping trips, her plan was stark: divorce him, seize half his considerable wealth amassed from diverse investments, and disappear with a new lover she'd met at a nightclub. Eric's discovery of her infidelity sparked a fierce confrontation during their hike. As angry shouts escalated, Becca snapped. Drawing the hidden penknife, she stabbed him repeatedly. Stunned by the sudden attack, Eric offered little resistance. Recognizing his corpse posed an existential threat to her freedom, Becca then shoved her mortally wounded husband over the edge in a desperate bid to simulate a terrible accident. Had the wolves not disrupted the scene, Becca would have been strangled. The burial, her dark scheme might have remained buried forever alongside him. The community found a grim, perverse justice in the wolves' instinctive act, seeing it as nature's intervention to uncover the hidden crime. Authorities swiftly arrested both Becca and the complicit doctor, ultimately convicted of murder and conspiracy. Becca faced a life sentence, her meticulous planning unraveled by the very wild animals drawn to their savior's disturbed grave. 4. Nate, the devastating truth proved unbearable. Losing his best friend to an accident was agony enough. Discovering the woman he considered his other closest companion was Eric's murderer, betraying them both at their core, shattered him. Tormented by memories triggered relentlessly within the grieving town, he found it impossible to stay. Nate chose a clean break, relocating to a place where Eric's ghost and Becca's treachery didn't haunt every familiar street. Though his wounds remained profound, he resolved to rebuild. In the forests near his new home, Nate walked often. He honored Eric's memory and the remarkable loyalty of the wolves by rescuing any wounded or helpless creature he found, determined to embody the deep compassion his late friend had always shown. It was a quiet, steady step on the long path toward healing. That's all about our stories. Do you have any thoughts after hearing the story? Please share it in the comments below.